Chapter 1 System Unit. About the chapter. Introduction. System Unit. Functions of System Unit. Front of a computer case. Back of a computer case. Inside the computer case. Comparison between System Unit and CPU. Introduction. Computers have become essential parts of our life. Everyone uses computers, but most of them do not understand how a computer functions and what the essential components of a computer are. It is important to understand the name and function of each component in a computer in order to understand how it functions as a whole. Attempt to always remember that a computer is based off the human body and functions in the same way. You cannot expect to understand the human body without first understanding its organs and their functions. A computer is composed of components in the same way that the body is composed of organs that together work to make the body or computer function. A computer has some basic components which include a system unit, motherboard, central processing unit, CPU, power supply unit, PSU, random access memory, RAM, hard drive, HDD, graphic processing unit, GPU, network cards. These components are the backbone of every healthy functioning computer. Let's explore all the basic components in detail. System unit. The computer system unit is the enclosure for all the other main interior components of a computer. It is also called the computer case, computer chassis, or computer tower. Cases are typically made of steel or aluminum, but plastic can also be used. While most computer cases are rather dull, black metal boxes, some manufacturers try to give the unit some flair with color and special design elements. Functions of system unit. The primary function of the computer system unit is to hold all the other components together and protect the sensitive electronic parts from the outside elements. A typical computer case is also large enough to allow for upgrades, such as adding a second hard drive or a higher quality video card. It is relatively easy to open up a computer system unit to replace parts and install upgrades. In contrast, it is quite difficult to open up a laptop computer, which is not designed with replacements and upgrades in mind. In most computer system units, the front side contains the elements a user needs frequently, such as the power button, an optical disk drive, an audio outlet for a pair of headphones, and a number of USB connections. The backside contains all other connections for power, monitor, keyboard, mouse, internet connection, and any other peripheral devices. There are typically more connections than the minimum necessary to allow for expansion. Front of a computer case. Following buttons, port, or items are found on front of a computer case. Optical disk drive, often called a CD-ROM or DVD-ROM drive. This lets your computer read CDs and DVDs. Power button. The power button is used to power the computer on and off. Audio in or audio out. Many computers include audio ports on the front of the computer case that allow you to easily connect speakers, microphones, and headsets without fumbling with the back of the computer. USB, Universal Serial Bus Port. Most desktop computers have several USB ports. These can be used to connect almost any type of device, including mouse, keyboards, printers, and digital cameras. They will often appear on the front and back of the computer. Back of a computer case. The back of a computer case has connection ports that are made to fit specific devices. The placement will vary from computer to computer, and many companies have their own special connectors for specific devices. Some of the ports may be color-coded to help you determine which port is used with a particular device. Power socket. This is where you'll connect the power cord to the computer. Audio in or audio out. Almost every computer has 2 or more audio ports where you can connect various devices, including speakers, microphones, and headsets. Ethernet port. This port looks a lot like the modem or telephone port, but it is slightly wider. You can use this port for networking and connecting to the internet. USB ports. On most desktop computers, most of the USB ports are on the back of the computer case. Generally, you'll want to connect your mouse and keyboard to these ports and keep the front USB ports free, so they can be used for digital cameras and other devices. Monitor port. This is where you'll connect your monitor cable. Computers may have other types of monitor ports, such as DVI, Digital Visual Interface, or HDMI, High Definition Multimedia Interface. Serial port. This port is less common on today's computers. It was frequently used to connect peripherals like digital cameras, but it has been replaced by USB and other types of ports. PS/2. These ports are sometimes used for connecting the mouse and keyboard. Typically, the mouse port is green and the keyboard port is purple. On new computers, these ports have been replaced by USB. Expansion slots. These empty slots are where expansion cards are added to computers. For example, if your computer did not come with a video card, you could purchase one and install it here. Inside the computer case. Once you open up a computer case, it can initially be difficult to recognize the various components, especially all the different wires. However, if you look closely, you will probably start to recognize a number of components. Motherboard. A motherboard is one of the most essential parts of a computer system. It holds together many of the crucial components of a computer, including the central processing unit, CPU, memory, and connectors for input and output devices. The base of a motherboard consists of a very firm sheet of non-conductive material, typically some sort of rigid plastic. Thin layers of copper or aluminium foil, referred to as traces, are printed on this sheet. These traces are very narrow and form the circuits between the various components. In addition to circuits, a motherboard contains a number of sockets and slots to connect the other components. Parts of a motherboard. If you were to open up your computer and take out the motherboard, you would probably get pretty confused about all the different parts. Depending on the make and model of your computer, it might look something like this. To understand how computers work, you don't need to know every single part of the motherboard. However, it is good to know some of the more important parts and how the motherboard connects the various parts of a computer system together. Here are some of the typical parts. A CPU socket. The actual CPU is directly soldered onto the socket. Since high-speed CPUs generates a lot of heat, there are heat sinks and mounting points for fans right next to the CPU socket. A power connector to distribute power to the CPU and other components. Slots for the system's main memory, typically in the form of DRAM chips. A heat sink is a heat exchanger component attached to a device used for passive cooling. It is designed to increase the surface area in contact with the cooling fluid surrounding it, such as the air, thus allowing it to remove more heat per unit time. A chip forms an interface between the CPU, the main memory, and other components. On many types of motherboards, this is referred to as the North Bridge. This chip also contains a large heat sink. A second chip controls the input and output, I/O functions. It is not connected directly to the CPU, but to the North Bridge. The I/O controller is referred to as the South Bridge. The North Bridge and South Bridge combined are referred to as the chipset. Several connectors, which provide the physical interface between input and output devices and the motherboard. The South Bridge handles these connections. Slots for one or more hard drives to store files. The most common types of connections are Integrated Drive Electronics, IDE, and Serial Advanced Technology Attachment, SATA. A read-only memory, ROM chip, which contains the firmware or startup instructions for the computer system. This is also called the BIOS. The basic input-output system, BIOS, is the first thing you see when you turn on your computer. The BIOS is special software that interfaces the major hardware components of your computer with the operating system. It is usually stored on a flash memory chip on the motherboard, which has its own battery. But sometimes the chip is another type of ROM. A slot for a video or graphics card. There are a number of different types of slots, including the Accelerated Graphic Port, AGP, and Peripheral Component Interconnect Express, PCIe. Additional slots to connect hardware in the form of Peripheral Component Interconnect, PCI slots. CPU or processor. The Central Processing Unit, CPU, also called a processor, is located inside the computer case on the motherboard. It is sometimes called the brain of the computer, and its job is to carry out commands. Whenever you press a key, click the mouse, or start an application, you are sending instructions to the CPU. The CPU is usually a 2-inch ceramic square with a silicon chip located inside. The chip is usually about the size of a thumbnail. The CPU fits into the motherboard CPU socket, which is covered by the heat sink, an object that absorbs heat from the CPU. A processor speed is measured in megahertz, MHz, or millions of instructions per second, and gigahertz, GHz, or billions of instructions per second. A faster processor can execute instructions more quickly. However, the actual speed of the computer depends on the speed of many different components, not just the processor. RAM, Random Access Memory. RAM is system's short-term memory. Whenever computer performs calculations, it temporarily stores the data in the RAM until it is needed. This short-term memory disappears when the computer is turned off. If you are working on a document, spreadsheet, or other type of file, you'll need to save it to avoid losing it. When you save a file, the data is written to the hard drive, which acts as a long-term storage. RAM is measured in megabytes, MB, or gigabytes, GB. The more RAM you have, the more things your computer can do at the same time. If you don't have enough RAM, you may notice that your computer is sluggish when you have several programs open. Because of this, many people add extra RAM to their computers to improve performance. Hard drive. The hard drive is where your software, documents, and other files are stored. The hard drive is long-term storage, which means the data is still saved even if you turn the computer off or unplug it. When you run a program or open a file, the computer copies some of the data from the hard drive onto the RAM. When you save a file, the data is copied back to the hard drive. The faster the hard drive, the faster your computer can start up and load programs. Power supply unit. The power supply unit in a computer converts the power from the wall outlet to the type of power needed by the computer. It is called SMPS. It sends power through cables to the motherboard and other components. If you decide to open the computer case and take a look, make sure to unplug the computer first. Before touching the inside of the computer, you should touch a grounded metal object or a metal part of the computer casing to discharge any static buildup. Static electricity can be transmitted through the computer circuits, which can seriously damage your machine. Expansion cards. Most computers have expansion slots on the motherboard that allow you to add various types of expansion cards. These are sometimes called PCI, Peripheral Component Interconnect cards. You may never need to add any PCI cards because most motherboards have built-in video, sound, network, and other capabilities. However, if you want to boost the performance of your computer or update the capabilities of an older computer, you can always add one or more cards. Below are some of the most common types of expansion cards. Video card. The video card is responsible for what you see on the monitor. Most computers have a GPU, graphics processing unit, built into the motherboard instead of having a separate video card. If you like playing graphics-intensive games, you can add a faster video card to one of the expansion slots to get better performance. Sound card. The sound card, also called an audio card, is responsible for what you hear in the speakers or headphones. Most motherboards have integrated sound, but you can upgrade to a dedicated sound card for higher quality sound. Network card. The network card allows your computer to communicate over a network and access the internet. It can either connect with an Ethernet cable or through a wireless connection, often called Wi-Fi. Many motherboards have built-in network connections, and a network card can also be added to an expansion slot. Bluetooth card or adapter. Bluetooth is a technology for wireless communication over short distances. It's often used in computers to communicate with wireless keyboards, mice, and printers. It's commonly built in the motherboard or included in a wireless network card. For computers that don't have Bluetooth, you can purchase a USB adapter, often called a dongle. Comparison between system unit and CPU. System unit. CPU. Definition. System unit is the hardware-based aluminum case, inside which all the electrical components and other computer processors reside and work. It is also called computer tower, computer chassis, and computer tower. CPU stands for the Central Processing Unit. It is responsible for processing the input provided and provides the output as a conclusion. All the logical actions are performed under CPU's instructions. It is referred as the brain of computer. Components. Ports, hard disk, RAM, motherboard, processors, BIOS, optical drive, connectors, graphic card, and power supply. CPU has two basic components, one, ALU, and two, CU. ALU is the arithmetic logical unit, and CU is the control unit. Function. The basic function of a system unit is that it holds all the interior of the computer residing in it together. Enables the processors and another electrical unit to work collectively in a common hardware environment. The main function of the CPU is to process the data that is provided as input to the computer and provides the information after the conclusion as the output. Every single function performed by the computer is done via instructions of the processors. Advantages of computer. There are certain advantages of computer. High speed. Computer is a very fast device. It is capable of performing calculations of very large amount of data. The computer has units of speed in microsecond, nanosecond, and even the picosecond. It can perform millions of calculations in a few seconds as compared to man who will spend many months to perform the same task. Accuracy. In addition to being very fast, computers are very accurate. The calculations are 100% error-free. Computers perform all jobs with 100% accuracy but make sure that the input is correct. Storage capability. A computer has much more storage capacity than human beings. It can store large amount of data and store any type of data such as images, videos, text, audio, etc. Diligence. Unlike human beings, a computer is free from monotony, tiredness, and lack of concentration. It can work continuously without any error and boredom. It can perform repeated tasks with the same speed and accuracy. Versatility. A computer is a very versatile machine and flexible in performing the jobs to be done. At one instance, it may be solving a complex scientific problem, and at the very next moment, it may be playing a card game. Reliability. A computer is a reliable machine. Modern electronic components have long lives. Computers are designed to make maintenance easy. Let's recall. The computer system is the enclosure for all the other main interior components of a computer. The primary function of the computer system unit is to hold all the other components together and protect the sensitive electronic parts from the outside elements. The power button is used to power the computer on and off. USB ports can be used to connect almost any type of device, including mice, keyboards, printers, and digital cameras. Motherboard holds together many of the crucial components of a computer, including the central processing unit, CPU, memory and connectors for input and output devices. The basic input-output system, BIOS, is the first thing you see when you turn on your computer. CPU is called the brain of the computer, and its job is to carry out commands. RAM is a system's short-term memory. Software, documents, and other files are stored on hard drive. The power supply unit in a computer converts the power from the wall outlet to the type of power needed by the computer.